Two blockchains, identical code. One burns roughly 150 terawatt-hours of electricity a year, enough to power a mid-sized country. The other runs on less electricity than a small office building. Same software, same data structure, wildly different energy bill. The reason has almost nothing to do with how many transactions either chain processes and everything to do with a single design choice buried in the protocol. Most people assume a blockchain's energy use scales with its transaction volume. More payments, more power. It's an intuitive guess, but the data destroys it. Bitcoin processed roughly 300,000 transactions on a typical day in 2023 and consumed around 150 TWon for the year. Visa processed 192 billion transactions in FY 2023 and consumed roughly 0.3 TWon. That's 640,000 times more transactions on Visa using a fraction of Bitcoin's energy. Transaction count is essentially irrelevant. What actually matters is the rule each network uses to agree on which block is legitimate, the consensus mechanism. Proof of work. The consensus rule Bitcoin uses forces every miner to repeatedly hash a block header until they find one that meets an astronomically specific target. There's no shortcut. The only way to produce a valid block is to burn real electricity running real hardware, billions of times per second. So the network's total power draw is simply the sum of every miner's hardware running flat out, simultaneously, all the time. That gives us a clean formula. Total network power equals total hash rate, measured in hashes per second, multiplied by the energy each hash costs in joules. Both terms grow as more miners join chasing the block reward, which means the design intentionally turns electricity into the price of admission. Walk through the actual numbers. In 2023, Bitcoin's network was running at roughly 600 exahashes per second. The dominant mining chip at the time, the Antminer S19XP, consumes about 21.5 joules per terahash. Multiply those out, 600 times 10 to the 18 hashes per second, times 21.5 times 10 to the negative 12 joules per hash, and you get roughly 12,900 megawatts of continuous power, or about 113 terawatt-hours per year. The Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance independently estimated around 120 to 150 TWn for that period. The formula isn't a model. It's essentially an accounting identity. Every joule the network spends is a joule a miner deliberately chose to spend competing for the reward. Proof of stake flips the entire premise. Instead of proving you burned electricity, you prove you've locked up a large amount of the network's own coin, your stake, as collateral. If you try to cheat, you lose that stake. The security isn't provided by wasted computation. It's provided by economic skin in the game. Validators still need servers running, but those servers are just ordinary computers sitting mostly idle, waiting to sign a block. They're not racing anyone. The electricity those servers use is pure overhead, incidental to the mechanism, not the mechanism itself. Electricity is no longer the security deposit. Capital is. And capital, unlike burned electricity, isn't consumed. Ethereum's merge in September 2022 is the cleanest natural experiment we have. The chain didn't pause. It didn't restructure transactions. It kept processing roughly 1 million transactions per day before and after. The only thing that changed was the consensus mechanism. POW swapped out for POS in a single protocol upgrade. Energy consumption fell from around 78 terawatt-hours per year to roughly 0.01 terawatt-hours per year. That's a reduction of about 99.95%, not 50%, not 80%. Essentially, the entire energy budget of the old chain was the cost of running the hash rate race, and that race simply stopped. So, if electricity use is the cost of the hash rate race, what determines how big that race gets? The answer is the block reward, the newly minted coins plus transaction fees that go to whoever wins each block. At a BTC price of $60,000 in 2024, with 144 blocks per day, each paying 3.125 BTC, the network was handing out roughly $27 million per day in fresh revenue. Competitive miners enter until the marginal cost of mining equals that marginal revenue. The entire network's energy budget converges toward that $27 million daily ceiling. Double the coin price, and you roughly double how much electricity the world's miners will collectively pay to compete for it. But if more money flows into mining, doesn't the network just produce blocks faster than intended? It would, except Bitcoin has a built-in governor. Every 2016 blocks, roughly 2 weeks, the protocol measures how quickly blocks have been arriving and adjusts the difficulty target. More miners means faster blocks, which triggers a difficulty increase, which means each individual miner now needs more hashes to win, which consumes more energy per block. Marginal miners eventually find they're spending more on electricity than they earn, and they exit, restoring the Dieter's 10-minute target. It's a balancing feedback loop, and it's what keeps block times stable while simultaneously calibrating network energy to match whatever prize is on offer. The late 2021 Bitcoin hash rate surge shows the loop in action. As BTC's price climbed, new ASIC farms came online and the network hash rate roughly doubled over about 6 months. The protocol responded with back-to-back difficulty increases, first around 14%, then around 10%. Blocks kept arriving every 10 minutes throughout, but the energy consumed per unit of time had roughly doubled, tracking the hash rate. The difficulty adjustment didn't reduce energy use. It's not designed to. It's designed to keep block timing constant. Energy is the variable it uses as the adjustment lever. Now here's where it gets counterintuitive for anyone who thinks energy use is a software property. Take two blockchains that forked from identical code bases, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. They share the same SHA-256 proof-of-work algorithm, the same difficulty adjustment cadence, the same block structure. If code determined energy, they'd consume similar amounts. But in 2023, Bitcoin's estimated annual energy use was around 150 terawatt-hours. Bitcoin Cash's was around 1 terawatt-hour. Roughly 150th as much. The ratio almost exactly mirrors the ratio of their coin prices. The software is the same. The economics are not. To make this crystal clear, Bitcoin Cash forked from Bitcoin in August 2017. For the first hours of its existence, it was running on the exact same software, with the exact same miners, on the exact same hardware. The divergence came entirely from market forces. As BTC's price climbed and BCH's did not, miners rationally redirected their hash rate toward the more profitable chain. BCH's hash rate stayed low, its difficulty stayed low, and its energy consumption stayed low. Not because of any design choice in the protocol, but because the prize wasn't worth the cost of a bigger race. Code sets the rules of the game. Price determines how many players show up. So we've established that consensus mechanism determines whether electricity is the core security cost at all, and that coin price scales the size of that cost in POW networks. But there's a third variable that's completely independent of both, one that can make two chains with identical electricity consumption look radically different in terms of their climate impact. That variable is where the miners physically plug in. The carbon intensity of electricity varies enormously by grid. A kilowatt-hour from a coal plant in a heavily fossil fuel grid carries about 0.82 kilograms of CO2. A kilowatt-hour from Iceland's geothermal grid carries roughly 0.02 kilograms. That's a 41 times difference from the same watt. Run the numbers on a single mining facility. 1 megawatt of ASICs running in a coal-heavy grid at 0.82 kg CO2 per kilowatt-hour, operating 8,760 hours a year, produces roughly 7,183 tons of CO2 annually. Move that exact same hardware, same chips, same rack count, same hash rate, to Iceland on geothermal power at 0.02 kg CO2 per kilowatt hour, and annual emissions drop to about 175 tons. Same electricity consumed, same blocks produced, same contribution to the network's security. The carbon footprint shrinks by 41 times purely because of geography. This means that measuring a blockchain's carbon impact requires knowing not just how much electricity it uses, but where that electricity comes from. So now we have three independent variables that together determine a blockchain's real-world energy and carbon story. First, does the consensus mechanism make electricity the core security cost, or just an incidental overhead? Second, if it does, what is the coin price and reward schedule? Because that sets the size of the prize that calibrates total network energy. Third, what is the carbon intensity of the grid powering the miners? Because that converts electricity into climate impact. These variables multiply together. A POW chain on a high-price coin running on coal sits at the worst intersection of all three. A POS chain on renewable power sits at the best. And critically, no single variable tells the whole story. Pull back and look at the full picture. A blockchain's energy cost is not a single number baked into its code. It's the output of a system with three moving parts. The consensus mechanism decides whether the chain is running an energy race at all. The block reward value, which tracks coin price, sets the stakes of that race and therefore its equilibrium size. And the difficulty adjustment loop continuously calibrates the race so the chain keeps ticking at its target block time regardless of how many competitors enter or leave. Together, these three mechanisms explain why two chains with identical source code, like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, can sit 150 terawatt-hours apart in annual energy use. And then there's carbon, which sits entirely outside this mechanism. Two chains can be identical in every technical dimension, yet produce dramatically different greenhouse gas emissions depending on which grids their miners plug into. A 41 times variation in carbon intensity across global grids means location is as powerful a variable as the consensus mechanism itself when it comes to actual climate impact. This is why debates about blockchain energy often talk past each other. One side is measuring electricity consumed, the other is measuring carbon emitted, and neither number alone captures the full picture. You need all three layers, mechanism, reward economics, and grid mix, to understand what's actually happening. Here's what to take away. When you see a headline claiming one blockchain uses as much energy as a country, the right question isn't, is that a lot? It's, what consensus mechanism is it running? What is the coin worth today, and where are its miners? The energy number is a real-time gauge of a market equilibrium, not a fixed property of the software. It rises and falls with Bitcoin's price. It could collapse by 99.95% overnight if the consensus mechanism changed, exactly as it did for Ethereum in 2022. And the carbon footprint of that energy can swing by a factor of 41 based purely on geography. Two identical blockchains, wildly different energy costs, not despite sharing the same code, but because energy was never really about the code at all.